My girlfriend said she needed a compatibility test and secluded herself with another man for a week. I pretended to allow it but actually changed the locks, threw out her belongings, called off our future engagement, and immediately told her parents everything. Hey Reddit, my name is Connor, and I'm 29 years old. What I'm about to tell you happened 4 months ago, and I'm finally ready to talk about it. Even now, it still feels like I'm living in some weird movie where nothing makes sense. I might as well get this story out there since everyone keeps asking me about it anyway. I work as a project coordinator for a manufacturing company here in Tampa. The job pays decent money, and I've managed to get my life together pretty well. I own my house outright, drive a newer pickup truck, and generally have things figured out. At least I thought I did until 4 months ago. I had been with my fiancée Melissa for 3 years. She's 26 and worked in real estate, specifically selling luxury homes to wealthy clients. She was good at her job and made solid money doing it. Or at least she did until she quit 2 weeks before our wedding. She told me she wanted to focus on being a bride and handling all the wedding planning responsibilities. At the time, it seemed reasonable enough. My sister Brooke had been telling me for months that something was off about Melissa. She kept saying that Melissa was being secretive and was always glued to her phone, even during family dinners and gatherings. My best man Tyler, on the other hand, thought it was just normal wedding stress. Looking back now, I should have listened to my sister's concerns more carefully. 4 days before our wedding, Melissa went out with her girlfriends for what she called a last night of freedom kind of thing. She didn't come home until 3:30 in the morning, which struck me as unusual since she was typically home by midnight at the latest. When I asked her about why she was out so late, she immediately got super defensive and accusatory. She started saying I was being controlling and possessive, which caught me completely off guard since I was just asking a simple question about her night. We ended up having this massive fight where she actually suggested that maybe we should postpone the wedding. The whole argument escalated so quickly that I barely knew how to respond. In the end, I apologized like a complete idiot, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. I just wanted things to go back to normal before our big day. The wedding day itself started normal enough. I woke up around 7:30 a.m., feeling pretty good about everything that was about to happen. Despite the fight we'd had a few days earlier, I was genuinely excited to marry Melissa and start our life together as husband and wife. My mom called me that morning, completely freaking out about some centerpiece arrangement issue at the venue. Apparently, the florist had delivered the wrong color flowers or something equally trivial. I told her everything was going to work out fine and not to stress about minor details. Looking back, that seems almost laughably ironic now. My best man Tyler showed up at my house around 12:30 p.m. with the other groomsmen. Everyone was in good spirits, joking around and helping me get ready. The atmosphere was exactly what you'd want before your wedding. Relaxed, fun, and celebratory. We took some photos, had a few drinks, and headed to the church feeling confident that this was going to be an amazing day. When we arrived at the venue, everything looked perfect. The decorations were beautiful, the flowers were arranged properly despite my mom's earlier panic, and our guests were starting to arrive and take their seats. I remember standing at the altar with Tyler, looking out at all the people who had come to celebrate with us. There were 180 people there, family, friends, co-workers, everyone important in our lives. Then the wedding march started playing, and everyone turned around to look at the back doors of the church. There she was, Melissa in her white dress, holding her father's arm and looking absolutely stunning. I have to admit, even with everything that happened afterward, she looked amazing in that moment. The whole scene felt like it was straight out of a romantic movie, exactly the way you picture your wedding day going. Her father walked her down the aisle with obvious pride, shook my hand firmly when they reached the altar, and gave her a kiss on the cheek before taking his seat. Everything felt perfect and exactly as it should be. We stood there holding hands while the pastor began his ceremony, going through the traditional speech about marriage being a sacred bond between two people. He talked about love and commitment and the importance of the vows we were about to take. I found myself looking at Melissa and thinking about our planned honeymoon to Costa Rica, about eventually moving into a bigger house and maybe having kids someday. All those future plans and dreams that you think about when you're about to get married were running through my head. The pastor finally got to the most important part of the ceremony. He looked at me and asked, "Connor, do you take Melissa to be your wife?" It was an easy answer with no hesitation whatsoever. "I do," I said, feeling ready for this moment and having absolutely no doubts in my mind about the decision I was making. Then he turned to Melissa and asked, "Melissa, do you take Connor to be your husband?" She looked at me for a second with this weird expression on her face like she was trying to say something but couldn't get the words out. I thought maybe she was just feeling emotional about the moment. Some people cry at their weddings, right? I figured she was just overwhelmed by the significance of what we were doing. That's when the doors at the back of the church opened up. A guy walked in wearing a dark suit, and I recognized him immediately. It was Derek, Melissa's ex-boyfriend from college. What the hell was he doing here? He definitely wasn't on our guest list, and I couldn't understand why he would show up uninvited to our wedding ceremony. Derek started walking down the aisle like he owned the place, not giving a damn that he was interrupting what was supposed to be the most important moment of our lives. Everyone in the church turned around to stare at him in complete shock and confusion. The wedding music stopped abruptly, leaving an eerie silence in the air. Even the pastor just stood there with his mouth hanging open, clearly having no idea how to handle this unprecedented situation. I was still holding Melissa's hands, but I could feel her entire body tensing up as Derek approached the altar. Her grip on my hands became noticeably tighter, and I could sense something was seriously wrong even before Derek opened his mouth. Derek walked right up to where we were standing and looked directly at me, then shifted his gaze to Melissa. Then he said, loud enough for the entire church to hear, "Melissa, I know you still love me." Melissa said Derek in this weird, strained voice that I'd never heard from her before. It wasn't surprise or anger, it was something else entirely, something that made my stomach drop. Derek continued without missing a beat. "The night we had 4 days ago was amazing. Come with me." The entire church went completely dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop in that massive space. I felt like I was in some kind of nightmare, thinking to myself, did he just say what I think he said? 4 days ago, that was the exact night she came home at 3:30 a.m. after her supposed girls' night out. The night we had that huge fight when I asked her about being out so late. I looked at Melissa, and she had tears in her eyes, but these weren't happy tears, or even wedding tears. She was staring at Derek like she was seeing a ghost from her past that she never expected to encounter again. The expression on her face was a mixture of shock, guilt, and something that looked almost like relief. Then she looked directly at me with those tear-filled eyes and said, "Connor, I'm sorry, I can't do this." Just like that, she dropped my hands completely. Her bouquet fell right to the ground at our feet, and without another word of explanation, she ran. Not walked, but actually ran, down the aisle toward Derek. He immediately followed her out through the back doors of the church, and they were both gone, just like that. I was left standing there at the altar in my tuxedo, holding her bouquet because it had literally hit me in the chest when she dropped it. 180 people were staring at me like I was some kind of zoo animal on display. My mom was crying her eyes out in the front row. My dad looked like he wanted to murder someone with his bare hands, and Melissa's family was just sitting there looking embarrassed as hell about what their daughter had just done. The pastor cleared his throat and said something about how sometimes life takes unexpected turns that we don't anticipate, but I wasn't really listening to any of it. I was just staring at those back doors where my fiancé had just disappeared with another man, wondering what the hell had just happened to my life in the span of about 3 minutes. My brain wasn't working right at all. I kept thinking this had to be some kind of elaborate prank or joke that would be revealed any minute now. Maybe I was having a nightmare and would wake up to find it was the morning of my wedding again, and everything would be normal and none of this insanity had actually happened. But no matter how much I wanted it to be a dream, I was wide awake, and this was really happening to me. Tyler walked up behind me and put his hand on my shoulder. "Dude, what was that?" he whispered, though it was so quiet in the church that probably half the congregation heard him anyway. I couldn't answer him at all. Honestly, I had no idea what to say to anyone at that moment. What was I supposed to tell 180 people who had just witnessed my fiancé abandon me at the altar? Sorry guys, turns out my fiancé was cheating on me with her ex-boyfriend and decided to let me know at the worst possible moment. Yeah, that would have gone over really well with everyone. Melissa's family was just sitting there looking absolutely mortified by what had just transpired. Her mother was covering her face with her hands like she could somehow hide from the situation. Her father was staring at the floor like he wanted to disappear completely from existence. Victoria, her sister who was supposed to be the maid of honor, was standing next to me in that purple dress, looking like she was about to either throw up or pass out from the shock of it all. Finally, Tyler grabbed my arm and said, "Come on, man, let's get you out of here." It was smart thinking on his part because I probably would have just stood there like an idiot for the rest of the day if he hadn't physically moved me away from the altar. We walked out through the side door of the church so I didn't have to go back down the aisle past everyone who was still staring at me, with a mixture of pity, confusion, and morbid curiosity about what would happen next. I got in my truck and just sat there for several minutes, trying to process what had just occurred. Tyler got in the passenger seat, and we both just sat there, not saying anything at all. What are you supposed to say after something like that anyway? Sorry your fiancé turned out to be a cheating piece of work? Thanks for being there when my life imploded in front of 180 people? There really aren't adequate words for that kind of situation. I finally started the engine and drove home to my house, parking in my driveway like it was any other normal day. Tyler asked if I wanted him to come inside and keep me company, but I told him I needed to be alone for a while to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. He said he'd check on me later and gave me this awkward bro hug before getting in his own car and driving away. When I went inside my house, everything felt weird as hell. Everything was exactly the way I had left it that morning when I was excited about getting married and starting my new life with Melissa. There was still wedding-related stuff scattered everywhere around the house. The guest list sitting on my kitchen table, Melissa's backup makeup bag that she had forgotten to take to Victoria's house where she was getting ready, and the fancy luggage we had bought specifically for our honeymoon sitting by the front door, all packed and ready for our flight to Costa Rica the next day. My phone started buzzing like crazy with incoming calls and text messages. Text after text, call after call. Everyone who had been at the wedding wanted to know what had happened, if I was okay, and what the hell was going on with Melissa. I turned the phone off completely and just sat on my couch, staring at the wall and trying to process everything that had just destroyed my life in the span of a few minutes. Around 5:30 p.m., Tyler showed up at my door. He had been calling me for hours, but obviously couldn't get through since I had turned my phone off. When I let him in, he had this look on his face like he was carrying bad news that he didn't want to deliver. "Dude, everyone's been trying to reach you," he said. "Your mom's freaking out, your sister's pissed as hell, and people are still at the venue because nobody knows what to do about the situation." It turns out that after I left, both families were trying to figure out how to handle what had just happened. The venue still had to get paid for everything, regardless of whether the wedding actually took place. The food was already prepared and ready to serve, the DJ was there with all his equipment set up and ready to go, and all the decorations were in place. Some people left right away because they felt uncomfortable staying after what they had witnessed. But a lot of the guests stuck around because they honestly didn't know what else to do in such an unprecedented situation. Melissa's family was apparently in full damage control mode, trying to manage the fallout from their daughter's actions. Victoria was going around trying to apologize to everyone on behalf of her sister, explaining that this wasn't planned and that she had absolutely no idea this was going to happen. Their parents were just trying to get through the day without dying of complete embarrassment over what their daughter had done to me and both families. But here's the part that really pissed me off when Tyler told me about it. Some people at the venue were actually defending Melissa's actions, saying maybe she just got cold feet about the marriage, or maybe Derek had somehow forced her to leave with him, or maybe there was some kind of misunderstanding about the whole situation that we weren't seeing clearly. Like, are you kidding me? The guy literally announced in front of everyone that he had slept with her 4 days ago, and she ran away with him in front of 180 witnesses. What exactly was there to misunderstand about that situation? The facts were pretty damn clear to anyone with functioning brain cells. Then Tyler dropped the real bombshell news on me. "Dude, I recorded some of it on my phone," he said. "I was just taking video of the ceremony like everyone else does, and I happened to catch the whole thing when Derek showed up and everything went to hell. At first, I told him to delete that video immediately. The last thing I needed was a recording of the worst moment of my life floating around for people to see and share. But Tyler informed me that he had already posted it on TikTok without really thinking about the consequences. He was just so shocked by what had happened that he uploaded it immediately, acting on impulse rather than considering what the ramifications might be." "How many people have seen it?" I asked him, dreading the answer. Well, it's kind of blowing up," he said. "Like 75,000 views in the last few hours. Great. Just absolutely perfect." Now my complete humiliation was going viral on social media for the entire world to see. I could already picture thousands of people making jokes about it, turning it into memes, and sharing it with their friends for entertainment purposes. My worst day ever was about to become internet content for people to laugh at. Tyler showed me some of the comments that were already accumulating, and they were absolutely brutal. People were calling Melissa every name in the book, saying I was better off without her, and making jokes about Derek's dramatic timing. Some people were even feeling sorry for me, which was almost worse than the jokes in a way. "Can you take it down?" I asked Tyler desperately. "I tried," he said, "but it's already been shared like 1,000 times by other people. Even if I delete my original video, it's out there now and there's no way to stop it." Perfect. Absolutely perfect. So not only did my fiancé cheat on me and humiliate me in front of everyone I knew and cared about, but now it was going to be preserved on the internet forever. People I had never met were going to watch me get my heart ripped out in real time and probably laugh about it with their friends. After Tyler left, I turned my phone back on to find 89 missed calls and 172 text messages waiting for me. There were voicemails from my mom, my dad, my sister, co-workers, friends, and even people I hadn't talked to in years who had somehow seen the video and wanted to check on me to see how I was handling everything. I didn't listen to any of the voicemails, and I didn't read any of the text messages either. I just couldn't deal with having to explain or discuss what had happened over and over again with every person who reached out. I turned the phone off again and went to bed, hoping that maybe some sleep would help me process everything that had occurred. But I didn't sleep at all that night. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what had happened to my life in the span of a few hours. That morning, I had woken up thinking I was about to have the best day of my life, and now I was going to bed single, humiliated, and probably famous on the internet for all the wrong reasons. The worst part was that I kept thinking about that fight we had 4 days ago, when she came home at 3:30 a.m. and got defensive when I asked about it. Now I understood exactly why she had been acting that way. She was with Derek that whole time, cheating on me just 4 days before our wedding was supposed to take place. Then she had the absolute nerve to get mad at me for asking reasonable questions about why she was out so late. I should have trusted my gut feeling about the situation. I should have listened to my sister Brooke when she kept saying something was off about Melissa's behavior. I should have paid closer attention to all the red flags that were apparently right in front of my face. Instead, I made excuses for her behavior and convinced myself that everything was fine. But it was too late now. The damage was completely done. Around 4:30 a.m., I gave up trying to sleep and just got up to make coffee. I sat at my kitchen table looking at all the wedding-related items scattered around. The guest list, vendor receipts, and those stupid little wedding favors that Melissa had insisted we needed, which had cost me $500 for something that nobody would actually keep anyway. All of it felt like evidence from a crime scene at this point. That's when it hit me that I needed to start making some practical phone calls to deal with the aftermath. We were supposed to fly to Costa Rica that afternoon for our 2-week honeymoon at some fancy beach resort. Everything was paid for and mostly non-refundable, so I needed to figure out what could be salvaged from this disaster. My first call was to the airline. I spent 25 minutes on hold listening to that annoying elevator music before some customer service representative finally picked up. She was actually pretty understanding about the whole situation once I explained what had happened. She waived some of the change fees since my circumstances were, in her words, highly unusual and unfortunate. It still cost me about $3,500 in penalties, but whatever. Money was the least of my problems at that point. Next was the hotel in Costa Rica, and that conversation was even more awkward because the guy I spoke with barely spoke English. I had to explain 3 times why I needed to cancel my honeymoon suite reservation. Finally, I just told him there was a family emergency and left it at that, rather than trying to explain the whole wedding disaster in broken Spanish. By the time I was done dealing with all the travel arrangements, it was around 7:30 a.m., and I had lost about $9,500 total. $9,500 down the drain, because my fiancé decided to cheat on me and announce it at our wedding in front of everyone. But honestly, I was more angry about the principle of the situation than the actual money involved. Then I started thinking about all the wedding gifts that people had given us. We had received expensive kitchen appliances, fancy bedding sets, picture frames, serving dishes, and all kinds of household items that people had carefully selected for our new life together. Since there was no wedding and no marriage, it felt morally wrong to keep any of these gifts. Plus, I didn't want any reminders of that disaster sitting around my house as constant painful memories. I spent the rest of the morning loading up my truck and driving around town returning gifts to people. I had printed out this simple note that said, "Since the bride ran away with her ex, figured you'd want this back. Thanks for understanding, Connor." By 11:30 a.m., I had returned about half the gifts to people who lived nearby. The rest were from people who lived too far away for me to drive to, so I just boxed them up to mail back later when I had the energy to deal with shipping everything. My truck was finally empty, and I was feeling a little better about the situation. At least I was doing something productive and taking control of what I could, instead of just sitting around feeling sorry for myself and wallowing in self-pity. That's when I remembered something important: Melissa's car. She had been driving my old Honda Accord for the past year while I drove the newer pickup truck. The title was still in my name because we never got around to transferring the ownership paperwork. She kept saying she would handle all the bureaucratic stuff, but she never actually followed through on doing it. Lucky for me, I guess, considering how things turned out. I drove the Honda down to the used car lot where I had originally bought my truck. The sales guy recognized me immediately and said, "Hey Connor, how was the wedding yesterday?" Didn't happen, long story, I replied. You want to buy this car back from me? The guy could tell something was seriously wrong from my tone and expression, so he didn't ask any more questions about the wedding situation. We worked out a fair deal, and I walked away with $18,000 in cash. I figured I would need that money to help cover all the wedding costs that I was now stuck paying for on my own. I got home around 1:30 p.m., and that's when the real work began. Melissa had been living in my house for 2 years and had accumulated a ridiculous amount of personal belongings everywhere. It took me most of the afternoon to pack up everything that belonged to her. I filled my truck bed twice with boxes and garbage bags full of her clothes, books, decorative items, and personal belongings. All her pictures came down off the walls where we had hung them together. Her books went into boxes along with her DVDs and personal items. I even packed up those stupid decorative pillows that she had insisted we needed for the couch, which I had never liked anyway but tolerated because I loved her. By 5:30 p.m., everything was loaded up and I was ready to make my delivery. I drove over to her sister Victoria's house, where I assumed Melissa was probably staying. Nobody was home when I arrived, which was absolutely perfect because I didn't want to deal with any drama, explanations, or awkward conversations with anyone in her family. I left everything on the front doorstep, probably 25 boxes and bags of stuff that represented 2 years of her life in my house. I put a simple note on top that said, "Your sister's belongings." Short and to the point, with nothing else that needed to be explained or discussed. When I got back home, my phone had been buzzing nonstop all day with incoming calls and messages. I turned it on to find 65 missed calls and 130 text messages from family, friends, co-workers, and even people I hadn't talked to in years. Everyone wanted to know if I was okay and how I was handling everything. But the craziest thing was a text message from Tyler that said, "Dude, you need to see this. The video has 4.2 million views. 4.2 million views in less than 24 hours. My wedding disaster had been seen by 4.2 million people around the world. I opened TikTok, and there it was. Tyler's video with thousands of comments, hundreds of thousands of likes, and it was still climbing rapidly every time I refreshed the page. The comments on the video were absolutely insane. People were calling Melissa every name in the book, making jokes about Derek's dramatic timing, and sharing their own relationship horror stories in response to what they had witnessed. Some people were even making memes out of the situation. There was one where someone had put dramatic action movie music over the part where Derek walked down the aisle, like he was some kind of action hero making a grand entrance. But here's the weird part that I wasn't expecting. A lot of people were actually being supportive and encouraging. They were saying that I had handled the situation with class and dignity, that I deserved so much better than someone like Melissa, and that I was definitely going to find someone way better than her in the future. Some women were even commenting things like, "If you're ever in my city, let me buy you dinner," which was both flattering and surreal at the same time. My personal nightmare had somehow become internet entertainment. But reading through all these comments from complete strangers who understood how messed up the whole situation was actually made me feel a little better about everything. At least other people could clearly see how wrong Melissa's actions were. I wasn't crazy or overreacting for being angry about what she had done to me. I started reading through more of the comments, and that's when I realized this video wasn't just going to blow over and disappear like most internet content does. This was going to follow Melissa around for the rest of her life. Every time someone Googled her name, this video was going to come up as the first search result. Every job interview she went on, every date she tried to go on, every time she attempted to start over somewhere new, this video was going to be there waiting for her. And honestly, I was completely okay with that consequence. She had made her choice in front of 180 people, and now the whole world knew about it. Maybe next time she would think twice before cheating on someone and humiliating them at their own wedding in front of everyone they cared about. That night, I actually slept pretty well for the first time in weeks. Yeah, my wedding was completely ruined and my relationship was over. But at least I wasn't married to someone who was capable of doing something like that to me. And thanks to the power of the internet, everyone would know exactly what kind of person Melissa really was deep down inside. Tomorrow, I would start figuring out what the rest of my life was going to look like, but tonight I was just going to enjoy watching karma do its thing in real time. The next few days were absolutely insane in ways I never could have anticipated. Tyler wasn't kidding when he said the video was everywhere. By day 3, it had accumulated over 11 million views on TikTok alone, and people were sharing it on every social media platform you could think of. Runaway Bride was trending on multiple platforms for almost a week straight. I couldn't go anywhere without people recognizing me from the video. I went to grab coffee Monday morning, and the barista immediately said, "Oh my God, you're the guy from the wedding video. I'm so sorry that happened to you." Then she refused to let me pay for my coffee, which was a weird feeling, having complete strangers feel sorry for you. But I wasn't going to turn down free coffee. But the craziest part was that people started sending me money. Like random strangers on Venmo and PayPal were sending me $25 here, $75 there, with messages like, "For the honeymoon you deserved," and "Buy yourself something nice, King." At first, I felt weird about accepting money from people I'd never met, but then I remembered I was out $9,500 on the honeymoon, and probably another $6,000 on wedding-related expenses that I couldn't get refunded. So yeah, I kept the money that people were voluntarily sending me. By the end of the first week, I had received almost $2,800 from random people on the internet who felt bad about what had happened to me. Not going to lie, that felt pretty good, and helped offset some of the financial damage. Meanwhile, Melissa's life was falling apart completely on every front. I started hearing things through my sister Brooke, who was getting updates from mutual friends about what was happening to Melissa in the aftermath of the viral video. Apparently, Melissa was hiding out at Victoria's house, too embarrassed and humiliated to show her face anywhere in public. I can't say I blamed her for that strategy, considering the comments on that video were absolutely brutal as hell. Then on Wednesday, Victoria called me. I almost didn't answer the phone because I didn't want to deal with any family drama or attempts to get me to reconcile with Melissa. But curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to hear what she had to say. "Connor, I'm so sorry about what happened at the wedding," Victoria said. "I had no idea that Melissa was cheating on you. I mean, if I'd known about Derek being back in the picture, I definitely would have said something to you about it." "It's not your fault, Victoria," I replied. "Your sister made her own choices and she's the only one responsible for them." "She got fired today," Victoria said, which stopped me cold in my tracks. "What do you mean she got fired?" I asked. "Her boss saw the video and said she was conducting herself in a way that's detrimental to the company's image and reputation. Real estate is all about maintaining a good reputation and professional image, and nobody wants to work with someone who's internet famous for running away from their wedding with another man." Victoria tried to keep the conversation going for a while longer, probably hoping I would say something about wanting to work things out with Melissa or give her another chance. But I hung up after a few minutes of polite conversation. I did feel a little bad for Victoria, though. She had always been decent to me during the 3 years I dated her sister, and now she was stuck dealing with the fallout from Melissa's choices. But the consequences kept piling up for Melissa in ways I hadn't expected. Brooke called me Thursday night with even more updates about the situation. "Dude, this is getting crazy," Brooke said. "Mom ran into Melissa's mom at the grocery store today, and she said their whole family is getting harassed by people who recognize them from the video." "What kind of harassment?" I asked, genuinely curious about how far this was spreading. "Like at church last Sunday, people were staring and whispering about them the whole time during the service. Her mom works at the credit union downtown, and customers keep coming in specifically to ask her about that wedding video everyone's talking about. Even her dad is getting grief at his job from coworkers who have seen it. That actually made me feel a little bad for Melissa's parents. They had always been nice to me during the years I dated their daughter, and they didn't really deserve to get dragged into this mess through no fault of their own. But then I remembered that they were the ones who raised the daughter who thought it was perfectly acceptable to cheat on her fiancé 4 days before the wedding and then humiliate him in front of everyone. So maybe they weren't completely innocent in how Melissa turned out as a person. The best part of the whole saga came Friday night when Tyler called me, absolutely losing his mind laughing about the latest development. "Dude, you're not going to believe this latest twist," Tyler said, between fits of laughter. "What now?" I asked. "Derek dumped her already, like he's completely done with her." "No way already." "It's only been a week," I said, genuinely surprised by how quickly that had fallen apart. "Yeah, my cousin knows this girl who works with someone who knows Derek's roommate or whatever." Apparently, once the video went completely viral and Derek started getting recognized everywhere he went to, he decided that Melissa was way too much drama for him to handle. He told her that he just wanted to mess with you and wasn't actually looking for anything serious with her long term. That was absolutely perfect and exactly the kind of poetic justice I was hoping for. So not only did Melissa blow up her entire life for this guy, but it turned out he was just using her to get back at me for some imaginary slight that I couldn't even remember. I couldn't even recall ever doing anything to Derek that would justify him wanting revenge. We barely knew each other when Melissa and I first started dating 3 years ago. So now Melissa was unemployed, single, and living with her sister because she couldn't even go back to her parents' house. "Why can't she go back home to her parents?" I asked Tyler. Apparently, her grandparents threatened to disown the whole family if they let her move back in with them. They're super religious, old school people who think what she did was completely unforgivable and goes against everything they believe in. That night, I was scrolling through the comments on the video again, and most of them were still absolutely roasting Melissa without mercy. But some people were actually taking the time to analyze the whole situation in depth, which I found interesting to read. One comment that really stuck out to me said, "This girl really thought she could have her cake and eat it too." She wanted the security and stability of the nice guy, but she also wanted the excitement and drama of the bad boy. Well, now she's got neither one of them. That comment pretty much summed up the entire situation perfectly. Melissa had wanted to marry me for the financial security and stability I could provide, but she still wanted to mess around with Derek for whatever thrill or excitement he represented in her mind. When she got caught and was forced to choose between us, she chose wrong and ended up with nothing. Another comment that resonated with me said, "Imagine being so completely selfish that you'd rather humiliate someone at their own wedding in front of everyone they care about than just break up with them privately beforehand like a decent human being would do." Yeah, that's what really bothered me the most about the whole situation. If Melissa had wanted to be with Derek instead of me, she could have just called off the wedding and broken up with me privately. Instead, she let me pay for everything, invited 180 people to witness what was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives, and then made a public spectacle out of dumping me in front of everyone I knew and cared about. But reading all these comments from complete strangers who understood exactly how messed up the whole situation was, made me feel validated about everything. I wasn't overreacting or being overly dramatic about what had happened. What Melissa did was genuinely awful and inexcusable, and thousands of people could see that clearly when they watched the video. Monday morning, I went back to work feeling better than I had in months. My boss asked how I was doing with everything, and I told him honestly that I was feeling better every single day. There was a promotion opportunity coming up that I was going to focus all my energy on instead of dwelling on relationship drama and feeling sorry for myself. That's when I realized that I wasn't the victim in this story anymore. I was the guy who had dodged a massive bullet and come out stronger and wiser because of it. And Melissa? She was just another cautionary tale about what happens when you try to play games with people's hearts and manipulate situations for your own selfish benefit. About a month after the wedding disaster, things were finally settling down into a new normal routine. Work was going really well. I had saved up a decent amount of money without having to pay for Melissa's constant expenses and demands. And honestly, I was sleeping better than I had in years. It turns out I was way more stressed about that relationship than I had realized while I was actually in it. All those months of wedding planning, dealing with Melissa's unpredictable mood swings and constant drama, managing her emotional ups and downs. I didn't realize how mentally and emotionally exhausting it all was until it was finally over and I could just relax. Now I could come home from work, watch whatever I wanted on TV, eat whatever I felt like making for dinner, and not have to worry about anyone else's problems or emotional baggage. My family was being really cool about everything too, which I appreciated. My mom had stopped asking if I was okay every single time she talked to me on the phone. My dad went back to giving me normal advice about work and life stuff instead of trying to be an amateur relationship counselor. And Brooke was just openly relieved that she didn't have to pretend to like Melissa anymore. "I've got to be honest with you," Brooke told me one day when we were having lunch together. "I never thought she was right for you anyway. She was way too high maintenance and always making everything about herself and her needs. You're way better off without her in your life." "Why didn't you say anything to me before all this happened?" I asked her. "Would you have actually listened to me if I had?" she replied. "You were in love, dude. When guys are in love, they don't want to hear that their girlfriend sucks from their family members. You would have just gotten defensive and made excuses for her behavior." She was probably right about that. I definitely would have gotten defensive and made excuses for Melissa's behavior like I had been doing whenever anyone questioned our relationship or pointed out red flags that I was choosing to ignore. Meanwhile, I kept hearing periodic updates about Melissa's continuing downward spiral through the grapevine of mutual friends and acquaintances. None of it was good news for her, and frankly, I wasn't surprised by any of the developments. Victoria called me again about 7 weeks after the wedding disaster. I almost didn't answer the phone, but I figured I might as well hear what fresh hell Melissa had gotten herself into this time. "She's really struggling, Connor," Victoria said, in a tone that suggested she was hoping to evoke some sympathy from me. "She can't find a job anywhere because that video comes up every single time someone Googles her name. She's been applying to restaurants and retail stores, basically anything that will hire her at this point." "That sucks," I said, trying to sound somewhat sympathetic but honestly not feeling much genuine concern for her situation. "She's been asking about you," Victoria continued. She wants to know if you're seeing anyone new, if you ever think about her, things like that. Tell her I'm doing great, and I hope she figures her life out, I replied, keeping my response brief and to the point. Would you ever consider talking to her directly? Maybe getting some closure or working through what happened, Victoria asked, clearly fishing for some indication that I might be open to reconciliation. We got all the closure we needed at the altar, Victoria, I said firmly. She made her choice pretty clear that day in front of everyone. I wasn't interested in playing therapist to her sister or getting drawn back into Melissa's drama. As far as I was concerned, Melissa had created this entire mess through her own choices and actions, so she could deal with the consequences on her own. A couple of weeks later, Brooke gave me another update that she had gotten through her network of friends and acquaintances. She had run into someone who had actually seen Melissa working at this chain restaurant out by the mall. Apparently, she was working as a hostess or something similar, making minimum wage and still living with Victoria because she couldn't afford to get her own place anymore. Her whole friend group dropped her too, Brooke told me. Nobody wants to be associated with someone who's internet famous for being a terrible person and doing something so publicly humiliating. Most of Melissa's friends had always been pretty shallow anyway, the type of people who cared more about maintaining their image on social media and appearing successful than actual loyalty or genuine friendship. It made perfect sense that they would distance themselves from her once she became a viral meme for all the wrong reasons. The Derek situation was even more pathetic than I had originally thought. I heard through the rumor mill that he had actually moved to another state completely, probably because he got tired of people recognizing him as the home wrecker from the viral wedding video. So Melissa had destroyed her entire life for a guy who used her to mess with me and then disappeared completely when things got complicated and the attention became uncomfortable for him. Around the 2-month mark after the wedding disaster, I was feeling pretty damn good about everything that had happened and how my life was developing. Tyler and I were at this sports bar watching a game when he brought up something that I had actually been thinking about quite a bit myself. You know what's crazy? Tyler said during a commercial break. If Melissa hadn't pulled that stunt at the wedding, you'd be married to her right now. You'd probably be miserable and dealing with her drama and emotional manipulation every single day. That night, I was lying in bed thinking about what Tyler had said, and I realized he was absolutely right. Yeah, getting left at the altar had sucked in the moment, and the viral video was embarrassing initially. But what if Melissa had actually gone through with the wedding ceremony? What if I had married someone who was clearly capable of cheating on me and then humiliating me in front of everyone I cared about? I would have been legally stuck with her, and divorce would have been messy, expensive, and emotionally draining. We probably would have had kids eventually, which would have meant dealing with her toxic behavior and manipulation for the rest of my life. Instead, I found out exactly who she was as a person before it was too late to do anything about it. Now I was completely free to find someone who actually respected me, valued our relationship, and wouldn't cheat on me or betray my trust. The universe had actually done me a huge favor that day, even though it didn't feel like it at the time when everything was falling apart around me. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you in the moment turns out to be the best thing that could have happened in the long run. And sometimes people do you the biggest favor of your entire life by showing you their true colors before you make a permanent mistake that would be much harder to undo later. I was actually genuinely grateful to Melissa now, in a weird way. Not grateful for the humiliation she put me through or the wasted time and money that her actions had cost me, but grateful that she had inadvertently saved me from a lifetime of being married to someone who would do something like that to another human being. It was better to find out at the altar than 5 years into a marriage with kids and a mortgage and all kinds of legal and financial complications that would make separation much more difficult. About 4 weeks later, I was having probably the best Saturday morning I'd experienced in years when I heard a car door slam in my driveway. I looked around the side of my house and saw this beat-up Honda Civic parked behind my truck. I didn't recognize the car at all, but when the driver got out, my stomach immediately dropped. It was Melissa. She looked like absolute hell. Her hair was a complete mess. Her face was all puffy like she had been crying for hours. And she was wearing these old sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt that I had never seen before. This was definitely not the put-together, professional real estate agent that I used to know. This looked like someone who had been living in their car or couch surfing for weeks. Part of me wanted to just go back inside my house and pretend I wasn't home, but I was genuinely curious about what she wanted after 3 months of complete radio silence between us. I walked around to the front of the house, and she was already standing at my door with her finger hovering over the doorbell, like she was working up the courage to actually press it. When she saw me approaching, she immediately started crying. "Connor, thank God you're home. I wasn't sure you'd be here," she said through her tears. What do you want, Melissa? I asked, keeping my distance and my tone neutral. She tried to step closer to me, but I backed up because I wasn't about to let her think there was any chance of physical contact or intimacy happening between us. Can we talk, please? Just for a few minutes, she pleaded. I almost said no immediately, but honestly, I was curious about what kind of manipulative bullshit she was going to try to sell me after everything that had happened. Plus, it seemed better to get this conversation over with now than to have her keep showing up at my house unexpectedly. You've got 5 minutes. Talk, I said firmly. She took a deep breath and launched into what sounded like a carefully rehearsed speech that she had probably practiced multiple times. It was all about how she had made the biggest mistake of her entire life, how she had panicked about getting married and making such a huge commitment, and how Derek had manipulated her and made her think that I wasn't the right person for her. These were classic manipulation tactics. Blame everyone else involved, play the victim card, and act like she had no real choice or control in the matter. He told me that you were just using me for the physical stuff and that you'd get bored with me after we were married, she continued. He said I deserved someone who was more exciting and passionate than you were. I was so confused and scared about making the wrong choice that I didn't know what to do. So you decided to test drive him 4 days before our wedding? I asked pointedly. Her face went bright red with embarrassment. That wasn't supposed to happen, she said defensively. We were just talking about everything, and things got carried away in the moment. I immediately regretted it afterward. But then Derek showed up at the church and you panicked? I continued. You panicked? You ran away with him, Melissa, in front of 180 people who came to celebrate with us. That's not panic. That's making a deliberate choice, I said. She started crying even harder and said she had realized right away that she had made a terrible mistake. Derek didn't actually want a real relationship with her, she explained. He just wanted to mess with me for some reason that she never fully understood. Then she told me that he had dumped her just 3 weeks after the wedding incident and told her that the whole thing was just to prove some kind of point to me. What point exactly? I asked. I don't know, she said helplessly. Something about you thinking you were better than him back in college or whatever. I never understood what he was talking about. So I had been completely humiliated at my own wedding because of some imaginary grudge from 10 years ago that I didn't even know existed and had nothing to do with me personally. Then Melissa launched into this whole speech about how she had learned from the experience and now knew who she really loved, and that was what mattered most. She tried to grab my hands while she was talking, but I immediately pulled away because I wasn't about to give her any indication that physical contact was acceptable. I told her what really mattered was that she was currently unemployed, living with her sister, and her entire life had fallen apart. So now she wanted to crawl back to the stable guy who had his shit together because all her other options had disappeared. She started getting defensive, saying that wasn't why she was there at my house. She claimed she had realized that I was the best thing that had ever happened to her and that she had thrown it all away for absolutely nothing. You're damn right you threw it away, I said. And not just for nothing. You threw it away in the most humiliating way humanly possible. That's when she really lost control of her emotions and started making these ugly sobbing sounds that probably had my neighbors looking out their windows to see what was happening. She began begging me to give her another chance, saying she would do absolutely anything to make things right between us. She promised she would get a job and pay me back for all the wedding expenses, go to therapy if I wanted, or whatever else I demanded of her. She even suggested we could start over somewhere else, in a different city where people didn't know about the viral video. And there it was. The real reason she was there. She wanted to run away from all the consequences of her actions and start fresh somewhere else, like none of this had ever happened. You think this is about the video? I asked her. You think I'm embarrassed about what happened at the wedding? Well, aren't you? She replied. The only person who should be embarrassed is you, I told her firmly. Everyone who watched that video saw exactly what kind of person you really are. They saw me get screwed over by someone I trusted completely, and they felt sorry for me. You're the one who looks like trash in that situation. That comment hit her hard. She stopped crying for a second and just stared at me like she couldn't believe I had said something so direct and harsh to her. Finally, she said, I'm desperate, okay? I have nowhere else to go. My family won't talk to me anymore. My friends have all dropped me completely and I can't get a decent job because that video follows me everywhere I try to apply. You're the only person who might give me a second chance. You don't want me back because you love me, I said. You want me back because I'm your only option left. That's not true, she protested weakly. Yes, it is, I replied. If Derek had wanted a real relationship with you, if you could get your old job back tomorrow, if your family forgave you and welcomed you home, would you be standing here right now begging me to take you back? She didn't answer that question, which was an answer in itself that confirmed everything I suspected about her motivations. I turned around and started walking back toward my house. She called after me, saying she would wait for me to change my mind, that she knew I still cared about her deep down, and all kinds of other desperate attempts to get me to reconsider. I got to my front door and turned around one more time. She was standing by her beat-up car looking completely defeated and hopeless. "Melissa," I called out to her. "Yeah," she said hopefully, probably thinking I was about to give her the answer she wanted to hear. "Next time you want to test whether someone's right for you, do it before the wedding, not at the altar," I said. Then I went inside my house and that was it. The final chapter of the Melissa saga was officially closed. She had tried every manipulation tactic in the book during that conversation. Guilt trips, desperation, promises to change her behavior, and playing the victim card as hard as she possibly could. But I wasn't the same guy who would have fallen for that kind of emotional manipulation 4 months ago. The whole experience had fundamentally changed me and taught me to recognize these tactics for what they really were. Melissa had taught me a valuable lesson that I would carry with me for the rest of my life. When someone shows you who they really are through their actions, believe them the first time. Don't make excuses for them. Don't try to rationalize their behavior, and don't give them multiple chances to hurt you again. She had shown me that she was selfish, dishonest, and willing to destroy other people's lives to get what she wanted for herself. I believed what her actions told me about her character, and I acted accordingly by cutting her out of my life completely. Looking back on everything that happened, the whole wedding disaster was actually a blessing in disguise, even though it definitely didn't feel like it at the time. Yeah, it was humiliating initially, and yeah, it cost me a significant amount of money that I'll never get back. But it saved me from making the biggest mistake of my entire life, marrying someone who would cheat on me and then humiliate me in front of everyone I cared about. Now I know exactly what red flags to look for in future relationships. I know my own worth as a person, and I won't settle for anything less than someone who truly respects me and values what we have together. The viral video situation was weird and uncomfortable at first, but honestly, it ended up working in my favor in the long run. Everyone could see exactly what really happened that day. Nobody could twist the story, make excuses for Melissa's behavior, or try to paint me as the bad guy in the situation. The evidence was right there for millions of people to see and judge for themselves. And the support I received from complete strangers was actually pretty amazing and restored some of my faith in humanity. It made me realize there are still decent people in the world who can recognize right from wrong when they see it. As for Melissa, I genuinely hope she figures her life out eventually and learns from this experience. But that's not my problem or responsibility anymore. She made her choices, and now she has to live with the consequences of those decisions. Actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences follow you around for the rest of your life, especially in the age of social media and viral videos. Derek disappeared completely after the video went viral, probably changing his name and moving to another country to escape the attention. That was probably a smart move on his part. He had accomplished exactly what he wanted to do: destroy someone else's relationship for his own petty satisfaction. And then he ran away like the coward he always was when things got complicated and uncomfortable. But in the end, Derek actually did me a huge favor by revealing Melissa's true character before I was legally bound to her through marriage. Sometimes your enemies do you bigger favors than your friends do, even if that's not their intention. These days, I'm doing better than I ever have in my adult life. Work is going fantastic, and I got that promotion I was hoping for. My social life is actually much better without Melissa's constant drama and emotional manipulation. I'm meeting new people who actually respect me as a person and value genuine relationships built on trust and honesty. The whole experience taught me that sometimes the worst day of your life can lead directly to the best chapter of your life if you handle it with dignity and learn from what happened. And sometimes people do you the biggest favor imaginable by removing themselves from your life, even if they do it in the most dramatic and public way possible. So yeah, that's my story about the day my fiancée ran away with her ex-boyfriend at our wedding, and how it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me in the long run. If there's one piece of advice I can give to anyone reading this, it's this: if someone shows you who they really are through their actions, believe them immediately. Don't make excuses for their behavior. Don't try to fix them or change them. And don't convince yourself that they'll be different in the future. Just believe what they're showing you and act accordingly. Your future self will thank you for having the courage to walk away from people who don't deserve to be in your life. And if someone ever humiliates you in public the way Melissa humiliated me, remember that their actions say everything about their character and absolutely nothing about yours. The internet might make you famous for a day or a week, But living with integrity and self-respect makes you a winner for life. Trust me on that one. I learned it the hard way, but it was absolutely worth learning.